The Six Nations is dead. Long live the Six Nations. It never seems to end. It's the glorious thing about them moving these two windows. You get back to back. You get, I suppose, 10 rounds of Six Nations.
10 rounds?
But then you get the break weeks as well, so you stretch out even longer. The Women's Six Nations has begun.
Yay!
We are 3 games in, 1 round in, 1 weekend in. All 6 teams have played. We have impressions on all of them. And we're going to run through game by game. Over the course of the tournament, we are just going to go week by week and work out a format that fits for that round's games and how they've gone and what's been played and what we've got to say about them and look over. However, we are going to begin, I think, with Ireland versus France.
Yes, we're going to look at all 3 of them in this one video. As you say, that won't always be the case. It basically swings on how interesting some of the results are and how much we have to say in terms of analysis. That said, now that we've said this and committed to this, we're going to talk for about 45 minutes per game, aren't we?
That's the plan. That's the plan, yeah.
Ireland versus France,
Yes.
first off. When, in a way, as I expected they would, just get a kind of different, more roundabout kind of order.
Yeah.
Obviously, major squeaky bum time in the last 10 minutes or so for France.
Footy bum time, as we say here.
I knew that Ireland would be up to the challenge and very fired up for the occasion. France were always going to score that securing try that Emily Boulard scored. I thought they'd score it 10, 15 minutes earlier.
Okay, yeah. I think this game is a perfect demonstration of where Ireland are right now.
Yeah.
And I think that result beating the Black Ferns was weirdly an anomaly. That is their ceiling, and they hit it, you know?
Yeah.
Their ceiling is every now and again pulling off a result like that. But consistently, where they're at is hanging in there against teams like this for 60-something minutes.
Yes.
And every now and again, they will have one-off performances where that stretches to 80, right? Just the wee odd performances where that's down to 40.
Yeah, 100%.
But that's where Ireland are at the minute. And we saw a really good encapsulation of that, I think, in terms of both approach to the game, but particularly physicality.
Yeah.
I think that French pack were massive. And going 6-2 with the bench was an inspired decision because I think they knew that was coming. And yet I did spend all that first half thinking, how long can Ireland live with this?
Yeah.
Like, how long can they put up with this? And it turns out they got a few counter shots of their own in, which were hugely beneficial. But ultimately, I think they did give way towards the end.
Yeah. I think that Black Ferns game kind of showed that they can win big games.
Yeah.
And this kind of showed a more realistic perspective that it's not that they do win big games, it's that they can win big games, you know.
They've come an awfully long way in a year.
It's
right?
it's insane. It's insane. But I think they are still in the process of learning how to close out those occasions, you know, where there is pressure on them. They're playing against a team who has been there and done it, against, you know, packs who usually walk people over, who have 50+ caps, you know, spread amongst them. It's a difficult challenge, you know, and I think they are still in the process of learning that, which is natural because they didn't know how to win a game 12 months ago, you know. That it wasn't until really that Wales game where they absolutely battered them last year, which felt like a bit of a turning point. It's like, oh, wait, no, Ireland are going to be actually good now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It wasn't fluke results.
Yes.
You know, and it wasn't, it raised their performance level. They had raised everything about them as a team.
Yeah.
And so I thought their performance was pretty exceptional. However, France, I think, did look like the better team pretty much the whole way through.
Yeah.
Or through most of the game.
There was a calmness to them.
Yeah.
For the majority.
Which I think in some ways worked against them. There was a point early on when you thought they were going to run away with this by some margin because Ireland was struggling to live with that pack physically. However, what they did do, and again, having a 6-2 split allowed them to do this, was Dorothy Wall, I thought was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Incredibly physical, everywhere. Did such a good job of just putting shots in at the breakdown, of fronting up in tackles. Of
Nails her role in the line out and in attack as well.
Yeah. But just in terms of the added value she had through the physicality, I thought was brilliant. Just that France team love quick ball. Bourdon Saint-Just plays incredibly fast, generally. And again, if we look at just the Vernier try, right, as an example of what happens when, I mentioned Dorothy Wall, Niamh O'Dowd, I thought was possibly the best player on the pitch.
She was exceptional.
I thought she was Ireland's best player for me anyway. I thought she was absolutely brilliant. Struggled in the first scrum, but from there on out was absolutely phenomenal around the pitch and then really held up in the scrum as well for most of the game. The interesting thing about France, right, and most teams, we see this a lot in the Red Roses. We see it with Ireland. We also see it with most men's teams who are good at finishing tries, right? So everyone but Wales. What they tend to do is when they get down to within 5 metres of the line, they start dragging opposition players in there, right? And they don't mind having lots and lots of players in and around the ruck because it means they can pin more opposition bodies on the floor and they can create gaps, right? And you can drag players off their feet, drag players out the game, and allow you to squeeze past them, to pull perhaps a scrum half or a centre or a winger into a flanker's channel so you can send someone bigger up against them to try and get that one extra
Or
yard
even
make.
just tighten that line so someone's unmarked on the wing, so
Yeah.
everyone has to step in one.
Yeah. France don't do that. France's approach instead is same as you would on the halfway line, you want as few players in the ruck as possible so that you have more forwards on their feet, which is a completely different approach. And I'm so interested whether more teams start doing this as we see like other men, right, who have kind of changed the game by playing much wider off 5 metre channels, so they play off line-out ball from 5 metres out and so on, much more than anyone else. And other teams start to clock onto that. I wonder whether this France innovation is going to lead to more teams doing it, because we see them just have wave after wave available and they have so many players on their feet and being watched, right? And so they work right the way out through these forwards, constantly crashing it up, having so many players available because they're going for one woman clear outs. They're having one player in that ruck. They're not trying to tie in any Ireland defenders. Generally though, because they're 5 metres out and they can't afford to concede a single metre, Ireland are putting 2 or 3 into each tackle.
Yeah.
And it means that naturally, when only one person, often these were backs, fly in to clear out, you're then left with a full 13 players against maybe 12, 11 Irish players on their feet.
Yeah.
So it allows them to overwhelm them in terms of numbers. Ireland then reload open side because there's so many French players on their feet there, and it allows Vernier to come in and pick that line on the open side with just 2 backs, leaving themselves quite open for them to hit that line between them.
I want to look at a couple of phases prior to that
Yeah.
as well. It all obviously starts with, as most things for France, Madusu Fall-Raclos getting them over the gain line and having a ridiculously powerful carry, which just sets Ireland onto the back foot a little bit.
Yeah.
However, they use her twice as a carrier here. But on the second one, I think is the most interesting one because Ireland have a choice to make. Up to this point, they've done a really good job of folding around the corner, knowing that big carries are going to come, right? However, when France have worked it to midfield and Fall-Raclos are about to carry again, you then have to make a choice of, do we fold more players round? Because if we do, it means that either a centre or a 10 or somebody, right, is going to have to come back this way onto what would then become the new open side.
Yeah,
because suddenly, if they get quick ball, they go out wide, you're attacking against forwards, right? Because you've got 10, 12 and 13 all on this blind side. None of those players with that level of pace other than wing and fullback are on the other side. And it's a gamble of, if you do fold round, rather than just trusting them, you've got to then kind of like switch around who's in what position, right? So Ireland just trust the 10, 12 and 13 to make these tackles, right? So Madusu Fall-Raclos runs in to Eve Higgins and Aoife Dalton. And as 2 much lighter players, both very good tacklers, but she is a bullshit carrier.
She's enormous.
Against anybody, right? She obviously gets on the front foot, and this ruck is lightning quick. It's a less than 2 second ruck.
Again,
and
it's one player clearing out.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely smashing beyond the ball, not looking to drag anyone in, just going want the fastest ball we possibly can for Bourdon Saint-Just.
yeah, and obviously at this point there's just one winger on the blind side. Dana O'Brien at 10 is just going to look up and just go, well, I need to help her out, and ends up watching the breakdown. She thinks I'm in the right position as it is, and Vernier always punishes players for this.
Yeah.
She is the master of this line. When O'Brien's eyes are turned inwards towards the ruck, she runs for that gap, and it is so hard to adjust to that.
Yeah, it's a brilliant line. It's Gabrielle Vernier at her absolute best.
It's her speciality.
She, until the red card, was sensational. She was at her absolute best, right? But I think there was a definite, I don't know if it was a change in their approach. I don't know if a message got on to change and start doing it differently, or it was just they managed to do it successfully after that try, right? But subsequently, once France got into the Ireland half, once they got particularly into 22, which did a lot in that first half, we saw Ireland consistently going, France want as few numbers in the ruck as possible. This is how they attack. So they were throwing more numbers in themselves, right? And we saw particularly Wall and O'Dowd really going in there, just trying to make a mess, just trying to be incredibly physical, just force a second French player to come in. They weren't necessarily looking for the turnover. They're just looking to bring a French player out of the attacking shape into the ruck, right? And if you do that phase on phase on phase, it adds up. That suddenly France can't run their full pattern, phase after phase. They can't run the full numbers they want. And the whole idea with the French attack, which is to overwhelm you, suddenly isn't possible.
Yeah.
So that made an enormous difference, that tiny tactical change. Again, I don't know if it was Scott Bamad got a message on to start doing this, or whether one of the players spotted this, or it was just that was a plan going in, and hence the 62 penalty. They want to be incredibly physical, but they didn't manage to get it right in the first pass of the play. Partly because France was so fast and so enormous, and Bourdon Sansus, the speed she can play the ball with is exceptional. I thought she was really, really great. I do want to talk about her a tiny bit before we move on, because I thought she has done the thing that Antoine Dupont did, right? Where that could be anything, but Dupont was the best scrum half in the world. And then he went, okay, I basically maxed out everything I can do with the ball in hand, everything attacking wise, and he became one of the best defensive players on the planet as well. And Sansus has done the same thing. Bourdon has done the same thing.
Well, I was going to say, what other player's done that?
Yeah.
It's Laure Sansus.
Yeah. So there's a few moments of Bourdon Sansus' defence where she absolutely flies up. There's this moment here where she saves a try just by getting a positioning right and adapting 3 times. Like she pushes off players repeatedly, just shuts down the space completely, shuts down the chance. And then right at the end of the half, right, the way she is herring up out of field, just cuts off the eye line, leads to the knock on because they have to adjust last second to carrying. Her energy in defence, the way she brings both in terms of like the thing we often like criticise Ben Earl for, but she's always clapping, always chatting, always screaming.
I don't see why people criticise that.
Me neither. I'm all for it. But she brings so much energy, and she's now doing it both in terms of a line speed, the pressure she put on kicks as well.
Yeah.
I thought she was like pound for pound, absolutely phenomenal.
She's world class.
And didn't score me many fancy points as my captain, but I thought she was just like absolutely brilliant. Like, again, it's defence and it's kicking and it's so much else. Although actually France only had 1 box kick during the game, which I thought was a really interesting point as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was not much attempt to put kick pressure in, although I do want to get onto a little bit of that in a moment. Do you have something?
I just wanted to say also Chambon off the bench,
Yeah.
I think is just such an outstanding player.
Yeah.
In terms of just
She's flown under the radar massively.
when Bourdon comes off, it's just somebody who can up that tempo even more.
Yeah.
And she doesn't bring as much in the game management and the defensive side as Bourdon Sansus does. But I just think she is such a bundle of energy.
Yeah, no, massively. However, there is one more French player I want to bring up.
Yes.
Right? So, at fullback, we were all witness to the discreet charm of Morgana Bourgeois. Who
She was in my fantasy team, by the
Was she?
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a great selection.
Yes.
I thought she was the best player on the pitch. I thought she was absolutely outstanding. I put this joke on Blue Sky, but as I'm going to call it now, Jessie Toumoulier.
Nice.
That's like number 2, like the sequel to Jessie Toumoulier. Like, they have clearly just gone to Jessie Toumoulier's farm somewhere in Claremont and gone, have you by chance been growing a clone of yourself? Is that what you're farming here? And she was like, oui. And she presented them with Morgane Bourgeois. And I love that there's a player called Morgane Bourgeois. What a brilliant name for a French rugby player. But more importantly, she is everything France has been missing, right? Her cover at the back, she is so good positionally. Her work under the high ball, exceptional. But most importantly, her kicking.
Yeah.
Both for goal, where she is phenomenal, but also positionally. So this game got incredibly tight late on. Ireland did some fantastic work to get back in this game, get back ahead. Again, their maul, superb. Niamh Jones had a brilliant game. And then, right as the game is at its closest, there's 5 points in, Ireland are looking for a try. Bourgeois comes up with 3 moments which turn the game completely. So we see this, firstly, off this scrum, France just boot it really, really long, and they manage to get a bounce. It's a great spot, and they manage to turn them, right? Ireland kick it back, and we then see Bourgeois puts in, back-to-back over the sequence, 2 brilliant kicks. She almost like a great tennis player, kind of hangs it from one side back to the other and just hits it like corner to corner, forcing the Irish cover to work across because Ireland play quite a light backfield. And she almost catches them up both times, leading to eventually it's caught right on the touchline, and in panic, because she's meant to put a lot of pressure on as well, the ball is put out on the full. France get an attacking line out. They play a few crash-up phases. Again, Ireland are sucking numbers into that breakdown, which is doing the opposite of what we're saying, and it sucks in numbers defensively, which leads to an overlap where she can make the break on the outside herself. They then crash it up, and watched happen 1 phase later, the moment she's carried it in, but Boulard turns up and scores the try to win the game, to seal the game. This game was decided by like 3 or 4 moments of genius. Her penalty right before this, then a couple of tactical kicks, then a break, right? By the same player, turning this game that felt like it was so far in Ireland's favour. She is the player France have been missing. They've got so many bullshit, ridiculous players, but having someone sensible at the back who can come in and just go, no, we're going to kick smartly, I've got a massive boot on me, and I'll make the outside break when it's needed.
Yeah. You know, one thing earlier when I said France had a real sense of calm to them, I realised immediately I don't mean that entirely.
Yes.
I don't mean that entirely because their backline does have a batshitness to it. Obviously, sadly, Nasira Condé had to go off early.
Yeah.
Only 1 fancy point from her. Gutted. But there are so many players in that backline, you know, the Menegers, to an extent the Boulards, who are, and Chambon, as I was on about earlier, who are capable of just sheer batshitness. But you're right, that you look at the likes of Bourgeois, and she really calms, and Laurence as well on the left wing. Like, and Bourdon Sansus when she's on, obviously, and Vernier when she's not getting sent off.
Bourdon Sansus can do anything.
Yeah.
You know.
That they're all capable of slowing that down, calming it down, and so on. And that really balances out, like, Arbez and Kewar, I think, are such chaotic tens.
I thought Kewar was a big improvement. I thought Arbez was silly.
It's back to
silly is the word I'd use.
Yeah. It's back to the Lopez and Plisson days for the men's team, isn't it?
Plisson is the player I thought of.
Yeah.
Where they seem they're not boxes. Right?
No.
But there is this kind of, I mean, we all know Caroline Drouin is boxes, right?
Yes.
This analogy. But there is this kind of like, they seem quite boring and efficient. That's not, I don't mean that as a criticism, but like they're a boring type fly half and they kind of just do their job. And then they'll do the silliest thing you've ever seen in your life, like a backwards cross kick to someone stood next to you, and just putting in these insane decisions. And you can't predict her minute to minute because she seems like we should be looking at a very sensible fly half most of the time. And then she'll just do something nuts because she remembers she's French.
Yep.
I can't get a read on her at all. And I am so curious to see her develop over this tournament. Though, if I was a French coach, I would just be putting Couillard in.
I mean, there's certainly 2 options, weren't there?
Yeah.
And to be fair, Bourgeois could play 10 as well.
Yeah,
so that is also an
But
option.
I think she's nailed in the fullback shot. I thought she was so good as a fullback.
Yeah, that Ramos role at the back.
It's a Tremoulier role. She's Tremoulier.
The Tremoulier role,
She's just the second coming of Jessie Tremoulier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is as high praise you possibly
We haven't talked that much about Ireland, but
I'm going to do that.
Superb. Yeah, okay, please
I'm going
do
to talk about a little bit about Ireland because you mentioned earlier their Nivo Dowd being potentially the best player for them. I want to talk a little bit about their pack and just how well drilled they are. O'Dowd in particular, I think she's the person who, rather than saying that she was the best player, I would say she's kind of the person who summed that up a little bit.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
because a lot of Ireland's game now, you love it when teams get slightly self-aware, is around how can we get Wafer into the best positions to carry, you know? This one here is a really good one where just off line out, they give it straight to Wafer. She gets a 1v1 carry on, and O'Dowd, as her inside latch, just comes in, tackles the tackler. Wafer then just carries on running. It looks like she's broken the tackle. It's completely O'Dowd's doing because she's dealt with the tackler. And Wafer lands on top of Bernadou, who for some reason looks like Batman now.
Yeah,
and
Rose Bernadou is just Batman now.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Bernadou can't roll away, and Ireland get the penalty out of this, even though they're the ones that are doing something that is on the edge of the law, let's say.
Bernadou begins.
Yeah, very good, very good. I also want to quickly look at, from the line out, Wafer's try, because the first try this is. Offset piece, because obviously they go for a line-out move that requires Wafer running at somebody. Pretty simple, it's pretty nice. I want to drill down to the details of this, okay? So there's 2 things that are significant about the fact Bernadou is stood at number 2 in the line, right? And they both boil down to the fact that you can tell that France aren't going to contest this line out because they have Bernadou in the main jumping position as a tight head prop. You can probably tell it'll be all right, right?
Is Bernadou at number 2 the dark prop? It's the sequel to Bernadou Begins.
Very good, very good.
When they play against Wales, do you think Wilkins will play? So it'll be Batman and Robin.
That is good. That is good. We have all 6 nations to think of more of these. All right. So Dorothy Wall goes for a dummy jump at the front here. And usually these don't mean much, but it's extremely theatric. No one jumps like this. Her legs are absolutely everywhere. And Wafer really goes for the dummy lift as well. it's a visual distraction for France to make it look like they're going up at the front against Bernardo, and then they go to the back. And it's very, very significant that they go to the back, right? Because France are late to then contest and go, right, we need to actually push in this maul. And the second important thing about knowing France won't contest is Niamh Jones's throw does not have to be perfectly straight. Because there's no contest. The new interpretation of the law states that if it's slightly skew, then referees are more likely to let it go. Holly Davidson, extremely experienced referee, is going to let this go. Which means that the transfer from Erin King down to Dorothy Wall is so smooth. Wall rips it off her before King's even hit the floor here. And obviously the reason why they want to target the back of the line is so France can't then fold out. So they can get away from running infield as their strongest carrier. And you have O'Dowd comes and essentially pushes Wall over into the French gap, right? You also have Campbell coming in the side. If she had any bottle, she would walk, is essentially blocking Bernardo from managing to work around. Everybody's head is down. They're pushing in this maul. They completely believe that that's what they're going for. And yeah, they've plugged the small gap here. So Soshag goes in for the tackle on Wafer, but she only clocks that Wafer has the ball until the last second, so she's already on the outside. Yeah. And she gets a 1v1 tackle against Falou. And Falou kind of like gambles and goes high on her, which you have to do to wrap the ball up to try and hold her up. But as any rugby player knows, going high on a bigger player means you're less likely to make a tackle and to complete it. So Wafer just brushes her off and scores. And it was just a brilliant play by Ireland. Everyone nails their role, and it gives way for a 1v1 carry within 5 minutes of the try line. She's going to take those every single time.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's a brilliant take and try. And Wafer just absolutely superb all game.
Yeah.
Like absolutely brilliant. Took a second try incredibly well.
Yeah.
That's what I was going for. Speaking of as well, things I began to say, should talk about Wales against Scotland.
Yeah.
So, the first game of the Sean Lynn era began incredibly brightly, didn't end so well. It had like a flurry at the end, but perhaps didn't have the result they wanted. As a general point, how are you feeling about both of these fixtures? Both of these teams, rather. The fixture is just one of them.
From a Welsh perspective, Wales played well.
Yes.
And obviously, despite everything positive we were saying last week, I went into this with a lot of dread that it would go very similarly to when these two played in the autumn.
Yep.
And it was morbid.
It was really tight for a half.
Yeah.
And then Scotland pulled away massively from around the 50-minute mark.
And it was horrible to watch because they gave you hope and then they just weren't as good on any level as Scotland were. However, Wales did play well, and I'm pleased with that. And most of all of the head-scratching selections that Sean Lynn made were in a way justified. So I'm going to talk about all of those first. Maisie Davis, absolutely brilliant.
She was phenomenal. She was brilliant.
As a kid playing loose head prop.
That first scrum, her absolutely mashing experienced internationals.
Yeah.
Making a real statement. She's, not even 20?
Yeah.
Which is unbelievable for a loose head prop. So she was absolutely fantastic.
We remember what happened a few years ago when Sive McGrath played against Cecilia Tuipulotu.
Yeah.
And I mean, Cecilia was only a kid then as well. But coming straight in, it can be a danger to put in a prop of that age. But she really, really held her own. I think around the park, like her carrying and tackling were excellent. And yeah, in the scrum, they weren't all as dominant as that, but she certainly held her own. So that was brilliant. Alal Pearce, I think, is
phenomenal.
very much like, you can tell that she's in her first few caps, which isn't a bad thing at all. But like, she's a big unit, and Wales need one of those in the second row. The amount of years Wales have gone where they've had second rows who want real line-out options.
Right? Which even Abby Fleming, who I thought was possibly Wales' best player on Saturday.
She was very good.
I thought she had one of the best games of her Welsh career so far. She is still a converted flanker. Yeah. Right? She was a flanker for most of her career and just moved into the second row because there was an absence there for the national team.
Yeah.
I thought she was absolutely brilliant at the weekend.
Yeah.
I thought her and Pearce sort of weirdly nailed themselves down into that second row position out of nowhere.
I want to see more of Alal Pearce, you know. And again, she's young, she's only 20 years old. She's got a big future, and as I say, you can use her as a big carry, you can use her as a line-out forward. I'm sure she's going to contribute a lot to scrums going forward. Really, really good, really pleased with that. And the other one, there are a lot of things we can say about the whole Kayleigh Powell at 12 experiment. So as far as I can tell, I don't know if Kayleigh Powell's ever played professional rugby at 12 before. I've certainly never seen it if she has. She's played a lot at 10, a lot of fullback, I believe a little bit on the wing.
A little bit on the wing.
She's obviously a very high-level sevens player, has been to the Olympics, excellent sevens player. But
this is it, that was the position she played in sevens, right? It was the equivalent.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where a lot of the logic comes in. I'm sure she has played there.
Yeah.
But
the main thing about this is, if you were asked who is Wales' main option at 12, who on earth would you say?
Yeah.
Because that is not a position where Wales have built depth to international standard where there are experienced players. You've got Karen Lake, who might be around for this World Cup, but certainly won't be around for the next one. You've got Hannah Bluck, who, aside from the questionable kind of stuff about her place in the squad, and the comfortabilities around that, she's a really good ball carrier.
She's a great ball carrier.
Yeah,
but is there any more to her game?
That's it. And
she
she's
regularly
outstanding
gets stood up on the outside from a kind of defensive point of view.
Yeah.
She'll make a big hit if she hits it, but like if she doesn't, she's not recovering very well.
At Celtic Challenge level, she's outstanding.
Yeah.
But I do wonder, is she much of a distributor? And I think that's what Sean Lynn probably wants looking at his Gloucester Hartpury team.
When Wales have gone with the two Hannahs and Jones and Bluck together, they get stood up an awful lot.
Yeah.
Because neither of them are that fast.
Yeah.
Or neither of them turn very well.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a worry there.
And otherwise, you're looking at somebody who's naturally a winger, i.e. Caris Cox, Kath Richards, moving in one, right?
Or Hannah Jones moving in. You perhaps bring in.
And then putting somebody at 13. Or you're picking somebody very inexperienced, like a Kelsey Webster or somebody like that.
Yeah, who's been playing very well.
Yeah, on the periphery of the squad. It'd be a huge responsibility. So I can totally see the DNA of what he was going for, because Kayleigh Powell is a really good kicking option. Yeah. She's got a great pass on her, and she's quick, right? She can run the crash ball lines.
I think one of the interesting things is there was a lot of talk when that team was named that it was clearly being done to distribute the ball and get the ball out more. And that wasn't what we saw. We saw the ball get wide an awful lot, right? And if we look at Wales' opening passage, which is superb, that Jazz Joyce runs it back from fullback, and they set up immediately, and they play phase after phase, carry after carry, just playing really flat. And Flaky George is outstanding in this passage. The way she organises it, the way she sits in the back, the way she waits and picks her time. But we are seeing generally, over any long period of Wales having the ball, Kayleigh Powell is being used as a dummy runner, as a crash ball option. She's not being used as a second distributor, which I thought was interesting. There's a couple of really nice shapes Wales run that were not in their game a few months ago, even though Sean Connor is the same attack coach that was there before. This move where we see Caris Cox flood out onto the outside, just like the players splitting off and changing lines last second. Just a lovely bit of subtlety that wasn't in the game before. Before it was very like straight up. You can tell as a defender what's coming up at any given point. The thing that I think is really pleasing and exciting from Welsh point of view, that is very small here, but towards the end of this passage, as they're in the 22, they smash it up, right? And Flaky George initially stood in at 10 here. They're looking to play this wide. They played an awful lot of her. She's mixed the game up really well in terms of long passes, dropping on passes, in terms of just where she's looking, who she's got around her. She calls for two forwards to come in front of her, and she drops in behind into the pocket behind them. I think just looking for a crash up rather than looking to play out the boot. However, the ball goes on the blind side where Hannah Jones has arranged a phase on her own. And she then plays that down the short side, right? So this becomes Wales looking to play primarily off 10 as they have been, which is a little different to Gloucester Hartpury, who played much more off 9. But they're very much relying on Flaky George to be the guy to take over. But also they're allowing other players to overrule that and to play that, and for Kira Bevan to still make that decision ultimately. And so seeing Hannah Jones step in and be that kind of second playmaker, really exciting, really interesting. And a moment later, space opens up, Kira Bevan makes the break, and so almost creates the try for our Pearce. I think there's an awful lot of rough edges here, and an awful lot that'll be sanded off over the course of the tournament. I look at that and I go, there's two things here, right? One is when they play Ireland and Italy later on in the tournament, which they've got a little bit of build up to, which is quite good. Those are the last two games. I think they can win both of those. I think I can see room of them improving enough to win those. Still,
I definitely think more of those chances will
think,
stick by then.
Yeah, I don't think they go into either of them as favourites.
No,
but I think it is. I think it is within them to win those games.
Unless we beat England this week, we beat Wales. Sorry.
Yeah, it'll be, which is going to happen by a
Yeah.
heavy margin. But I think we saw enough in terms of growth of things they weren't doing before that they are doing now, while still keeping a lot of the strength. So the scrum being very solid, the line-up being pretty solid, that pack working, like how hard the team work, the things that were working under Cunningham are still there. Just like I feel that there are layers being added on, as well as the kicking game we talked about before.
Yeah, kicking game, super, super important. I felt it was so much better this week than it was necessarily under Cunningham. That, granted, a lot of this will come down to the conditions as well, because It was not a nice day
Second
to
half in
play
particular,
rugby in
yeah.
the second half, yeah. And they did use Lakey George to just put up those horrible spiral bombs and
Yeah.
spiral punts downfield that were really difficult to catch. And Chloe Raleigh got caught out with one. There's this kick here where you look at it and you go, like, why on earth is Kira Bevan kicking that? And then it gets dropped. And I feel like they were using that much more to their advantage than necessarily under Cunningham. And you would think in slippery conditions that contestable kicks would be the ones to go for. But the thing is, it's slippery for both teams.
Yeah.
So even if you get under the ball and you're in brilliant form, brilliant place to take it, you still might just drop it because the ball's wet. Whereas here, there's a bit more speculation to the kick. And it's harder to kick well when it's slippery, you know, so they can always shank it back. I think that really, really worked. It was promising, both from an attacking and kicking perspective, the tactics Wales were going for. However, you do mention rough edges there, and I do want to use this as a transition into talking about Scotland.
Yes.
Okay. Because the Scottish D, I think, ultimately was what won them the game.
Yeah.
It was more good Scottish D than bad Welsh attack in moments. You look at this one here, so Wales make a really nice break down the blind side. You've got Kira Bevan feeding Caris Cox, who makes a lovely break up the left-hand side, and Kira Bevan ends up entering the breakdown. No panic, Wales are in good shape. Caris Phillips comes and steps in at 9, and Maisie Davis makes a really good carry here, gets over the gain line, and presents the ball well. After this, it gets a bit clunky, because Kira Bevan takes it out a couple of steps. I think she's expecting potentially forwards to flood off her. Instead, Lakey George has overruled that potentially and gets a push pass to her. And then Bethan Lewis and Alal Pearce are both here. And I think they've both heard a call from Kayleigh Powell in behind them that she wants the ball in the boot. And they both just kind of go, okay, well, the ball's going behind us. And by the way, Bethan Lewis and Alal Pearce, I think, were possibly two of the best players for Wales.
Bethan Lewis was really good.
I think, for me, they were maybe the two best players for Wales. But on this one occasion, they get a little bit flat, and no one in this Scottish defence is thinking, shit, I've got to mark Bethan Lewis. She's running a really good line here. Oh, shit, I've got to mark Alal Pearce, which is usually what those two are so good at, particularly like Bethan Lewis when you see her playing for Gloucester Hartpury. She's a double threat around that with handling, being a carrying threat, triple threat even, a dummy line, whatever, right?
And breakdown.
And breakdown as well, yeah. But they get very flat here, and Lakey George passes it again, a push pass into the boot where Kayleigh Powell has it, and it gets very predictable for Scotland. So Emma Orr and Fran McGee both do a really good job, and they fly up into, they're essentially invading the Welsh space here.
Sure, yeah.
They're like in the Welsh backline. And so Kayleigh Powell goes, great, they've flown up, that means there must be space somewhere. And she goes for a little kind of crossfield kick, kind of a grubber in behind.
The worst thing is this kick is definitely on.
Yeah.
There is massive space in behind.
There's massive space in behind. Obviously, we don't
She
know
just
exactly
spots
where
it
it would
too
land.
late.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the whole point of this is she spots it late because she's got two Scottish women in her eye
Yeah.
line. And also, if you look at this wide angle, you can't actually see a player here, but you can see the shadow of a Scottish player who will probably be able to cover that ground and get to that. But it is much better than her throwing a pass or getting isolated behind the gain line. You can totally see what she's going for. But Scotland have essentially tricked her into that by invading her space. And most importantly of all is the person who has to make a tackle, and that is Helen Nelson, has invaded that, clipped her heels as she's going for the kick, and Lisa Thompson flies through, hacks it along the floor. They go miles upfield, and Lisa Neumann and Jazz Joyce Butchers both get back, but the Scottish chase is maybe 5% better than the Welsh one. So Fran McGee gives Jazz Joyce enough grief at the breakdown that the ball spills out. Emma Orr is razor sharp, pounces on it and scores. And that, I think, was a microcosm of how the Scottish D works, because the amount of times they either create a chance of themselves or ruined potential Welsh ones or made them take wrong options. Not wrong options, but not as good
Dangerous
options.
options.
Yeah, exactly. Options which are slightly riskier.
Yeah.
Because
Or
the
incredibly
D is so
conservative,
good.
Or the opposite. You know,
Indeed.
force them into just carrying themselves or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, shutting it down. Yeah. You mentioned there Helen Nelson.
Yeah.
Right?
Player of the match.
Player of the match. And this is
Deservedly, I thought.
one of these things, right? Watching it live, if you asked me to name a player of the match, she probably wouldn't have come up. Watching it back a second time, I go, yeah, obviously it's Helen Nelson.
Yeah.
What was I thinking? What wasn't I considering? I thought she was superb. And obviously her kicking was an enormous part of this. The distance she's able to get on the average kick, but also the way in which she scanned the Welsh defensive line, right? That they went into this. Obviously, we saw Brian Easton said before the game that they spent more time analysing Gloucester Hartpury than Wales. in order to get an idea of how Wales were going to play. However, they wouldn't have known at all how they're going to defend the backfield, right?
Yeah.
Like, that is the one area you probably know the least of. So Nelson is doing this completely on the fly without any idea of what to look out for. And we saw them consistently find grass. And even when it was covered by the likes of Joyce Butchers, time after time, we saw Wales recover the ball, look up, and they would have 10, 15 metres to run before they make the Scottish line. The kicks having great hang time, but more importantly, finding bouncers to allow that chase up. However, beyond that, the way in which they've started to, and Helen Nelson isn't particularly a running threat herself, but she is so good at keeping a line engaged that you rarely see her go and take on a line and directly challenge it herself.
She organises the people around her to do that, though.
And she's always scanning for that.
Yeah.
Right? She's always having a look and she's always keeping an eye up. And so we've seen Scotland change their structures to run so much off 10 that they are playing almost entirely off 10 now. There's this passage, just want to quickly kind of look at, which I think is a lovely moment of, there's not much to say, but just the sheer numbers they put off Nelson. So she has about 5 players she can realistically hit. They're all running off her and all timing their run for if she selects to hit them, right? There's not a cold shape here. They've just got everyone in around her. It's not like they all know their pattern based on each other's movements or they've got the timing nailed down. No, they're just waiting for what she looks for. And in the end, she eyes that up because the Welsh defenders are having to watch. Verona Lloyd has come in here, come in tight from the far wing, like waiting just on the shoulder. They're watching her because you've got to. She's Verona Lloyd. She makes breaks for fun. And ultimately, it allows her to throw it to Chloe Rowley, who makes the outside break because the Welsh winger is caught ball watching, right? They're watching inwards. They don't notice as Rowley catches the ball. Only then they got on the outside, makes a break, gets up to the 22, was given a penalty moment later, and Rachel Malcolm goes over for a try, which ultimately gets disallowed about half an hour later. But like that all begins from just the options they keep giving Helen Nelson 2 phases in a row of her having runner after runner after runner on her. Everything is built around her just being smart.
Yeah.
She's got such a high rugby IQ that they just give her all the tools and the time critically. And that they don't have they have a start fairly flat, but like still with enough options around her. One of the rare teams that don't really play her out the boot. Like they play off her as the first receiver, old school style, so that she can make every decision because she's such an intelligent rugby player.
Yeah, and they can then use the likes of Thompson and Orr can sit out at the back of her. She screams of the kind of player who was born with 50 caps. You know?
Yeah.
The way that she knows every kind of condition you play in. It's like it was raining on everyone else but her.
Yeah.
You know, that she just kept a firm head on the whole time, and she's just an utterly outstanding international 10.
She's the sort of player that demands enormous wages in the Premiership all the time.
Yeah.
And it's such a shame that that isn't an option on the table because you know teams be scrambling to sign her.
Also, Leah Brebner Holden at 9, quietly very, very good.
Agreed.
And them having her on when it was slightly less appalling weather to be playing in, and then subbing on Katie Mattinson in the second half to kick it a lot more, was an inspired by accident decision by Brian Eason. So fair play.
Yeah. Ultimately, I think Scotland were very good for their win.
Yeah.
I think they were the better team. Wales's effort and energy is summed up by the scoreline in a way that I think the scoreline is fair on Wales but also harsh on Scotland.
Yeah, I agree. But still, losing bonus point. Come on.
It's the closest thing Wales has come to a Six Nations win for a very long time.
Hey, the men got 2 losing bonus points against Scotland, I think.
And 1 against Italy.
Yeah.
Best team in the world, mate.
Best team in the world.
Best team in the world. By which I mean the worst. Speaking of the worst team in the world, should we move on to the Red Roses?
Yeah, let's do it. So, I like how you had a good segue with the best team in the world thing.
But I can't.
And neglected it.
Yeah.
Because they are the dead Roses.
So, I saw a Red Roses fan, a Wallopy Joe on Reddit, who is a diehard Red Roses fan, like has basically cashed in on men's rugby to support, the Quins women and the Red Roses. Based, good decision, I back it. Saying this is possibly the worst performance I can remember us putting in for a very long time.
Oh!
And the thing is, I don't think he's wrong. And yet, imagine that being your worst performance. Still winning by 30 odd points.
I celebrated a losing bonus point 1 minute ago.
Yep. That is the level England are at, right? Is the winning by only 30 points against a team like Italy is the status quo. That is like not quite where they should be. That is things misfiring. That is, I think, John Mitchell put out a, should we say experimental team? Testing some depth.
Yeah, definitely.
And there were a few of those combinations didn't quite click properly. And we saw, again, when the bench came in and they had a few more familiar players coming in and playing players they're more used to playing with.
Yeah, it was a decent bench.
Yeah, but we saw things actually click slightly better, even if it didn't necessarily result in more tries. And yet, that first 20 minutes was also the most dominant I can remember seeing any team be.
That's it. Like, you're 14-0 up in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
You're destined for disappointment in the next 75. You can't keep that up.
The most remarkable thing about that period where England scored 3 tries in the first, 19 minutes, right, was Italy had 45% of the ball.
Yeah.
And I don't think they made 5 metres in a single attacking set. I don't think they went forward in a single attacking set.
Italy's first attacking set of the whole game, I think, sums it up perfectly. They only twice in this whole passage get more than one pass away from the breakdown. And they go through, I think, 7 phases. So there's this one where Medea just kind of tips it on to somebody. They play off 10, fine, no worries. But every single phase after this, they're just getting pushed and pushed and pushed. If not behind, then on the gain line. They're going nowhere, and suddenly they just, out of sheer panic, go, well, we've got to go wide now because this isn't working. There's not actually really anything on. And they go double boot here. Venner gets high in the line. The ball goes along the floor, and they end up going into touch. Yeah. Off this one phase alone, they make a 25-metre net loss and lose the ball. That is how aggressive this English D is, both mainly in terms of their physicality and then secondarily in terms of their line speed.
Yeah. I thought Mia Venner was brilliant.
Yeah.
Both attack and defence. The hardest earned second cap since Paul James. Really won it the long way around. I thought she nailed herself in as a World Cup squad place, I think. Potentially, England have so many wing options.
Yeah, there's a thousand.
Like actually saying anything is nailed in is too hard.
Just wait, like last round, like Millie David's going to come in and score 9 tries or something.
Yeah.
Like.
Defensively, she was superb. She took her chance incredibly well. And then she had a few more breaks down the wing where she was really getting space. But the thing about her try, I think, is the work rate of her working around from wing to wing. So she is moments earlier on the other side of the field, making a half break. And then the ball spreads back the other way. And I think there's about 40 seconds in which time she's got up off the ground, worked round, and is in position to score on the other touchline.
Yeah.
Like, her work rate is test level.
She was very unlucky not to have 3 or 4, frankly.
Yeah.
There's that absolutely outstanding tackle by Aramuzzo, who was incredible, by the way. Good. She was Italy's best player for my money. Like, she was outstanding. Her and Alicia Diinka, who is a complete, like, box of frogs. But, like, I love her. Like, I think she played very well. But even when Alicia Diinka plays very well, there's always going to be 1 or 2 things where you're like, what? Why are you doing that? But that's fine. That's just who she is as a player.
I'm going to take this moment to talk about Italy, to talk about them a little bit, right? Because we didn't do a preview on Italy, but I think the highlight, the main story with them is incoming coach Fabio Roselli.
Yes.
Right? So, if people aren't familiar with Fabio Roselli, he was assistant with Italy under-20s, with Zebre, but he kind of made his name. He also went to the 99 World Cup, but made his name as Zebre's head coach.
Yeah.
Right? And his approach when he took over as head coach was...
The men's Zebre.
The men's Zebre, in the URC. His approach with Zebre was, we are fighting to not be bottom of the table, right, against the Dragons, basically every season, though the Scarlets once. And in order to do that, what we've previously been doing is going for losing bonus points and seeing who between us and the Dragons can accrue more of those, because wins are very hard to come by. And he went, wait a second, you get a point for scoring 4 tries. So under him, Zebre just went all in on playing mad rugby all the time. And they became the most attack-first team in all of European rugby. Like, they were the most, like, we will run it from anywhere. We will give the ball to Simone Jesse at all times. I was going to
say, give it to Simone Jesse translates well to give it to Alyssa Diinka.
This is exactly the point I was going to make. Like, it is so perfect a comparison. Just like a player who, sometimes they do things and you go, why would you ever do that?
She scored?
Yeah, exactly. And then that comes next. But is just like capable of doing things no one else could. Yeah. And just like has such balance about them as a runner. And that is a really exciting thing, right? Is I think we didn't see much of that this week. We saw more as the second half got on. But I'm excited for over this tournament, can he start to implement the sort of thing that his first game with Zebre didn't go very well. His second game, though, I think they were against Ulster and they scored like 6 tries and only lost narrowly. So if he takes a similar length of time of only a few weeks to get his attacking game plan into place, potentially we might see this Italy team, maybe they won't win more games than they were before, but they certainly could start scoring more tries. And I think that's a really exciting prospect.
Great.
We already saw them score 2, when last year they didn't score any against them. And this, I think, is the Roselli game plan. That's what he's looking to do, is just all-out attack at all times.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to what I was saying about Mia Venner a minute ago,
Yep.
sorry to circle back to
No.
boring
I
old
just wanted to
England.
get a bit of Italy chat in there, right?
Absolutely. And they deserve it. But the lead up to the Scarrett try as well, where she gets dragged down just short there. And instead, this bloody Emily Scarrett has to pop up and score it.
A 55th try for England.
55th. And don't get me wrong, it's really good. Like when you watch it over from the overhead angle and you just watch, as soon as Scarrett stops her dummy line in which she takes Rigoni out of the defence, essentially, she's immediately scanning of like, right, which pocket can I get into from the Italian defence here? And eventually she just runs at the referee and just gets onto the outside of her. And like, you're literally on the try line colliding with Emily Scarrett. How are you going to hold her up? You're just not. It's just not going to happen.
If you are a young rugby player wanting to play pretty much any position other than the half-backs or maybe the front row, Emily Scarrett might be the best player in the world to watch, because her dummy lines, her commitment to them, the way she's always scanning, defensively her positioning is exceptional. And even in a game like this where she was broadly quiet, everything she does is right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I've seen her make an incorrect decision for the last 5 years.
Well, even more than that, because we spoke about this on
Including starting a
the...
podcast. Like, for how many people is that a good decision?
Well, I was about to say, we spoke about this on the World Cup Retrospective podcast. The fact that she's always had an incredible skill set, but it was realising that even in 2014, she was still this good at all of the basic stuff that makes her incredible. Like you mentioned a defensive position there. In my opinion, the best thing about Emily Scarrett is her attacking position, that she's always deep enough, she's always wide enough, she always knows exactly how to commit a defender. Yeah. It is like if you translate all the things we talk about George Ford's brain and take it to outside Centreville, you know, with the likes of Len Ikitau, Santi Chocobarles, Villy LaRue, like all of the sorts of people who just see it as a science of like, how can I draw this person in and make it hell for them, make them plant their feet, get on the outside of them, whatever it is. And the fact that she has a good skill set around it, like you're just showing off at that point. Like we get it, you can kick, you can pass. All right, Skaz.
I think there'll be deeper questions asked of England than this in many directions.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably another time to do a big deep dive into what this means, and whether this has any connotations for the World Cup, whether there's anything we can read into that with that mission going forwards. But broadly, as an England performance, how would you reflect on this?
If that's the benchmark, then that's probably fine. It's the first game of the Six Nations.
With a very changed team.
With a very changed team.
Most of those players played individually well, even if there were combinations that weren't quite getting
At no point did they panic, because like they could have just put on Kildun at half-time if they wanted to.
Or Byrne, or any of those players, Cabella, who was fantastic when she came on.
Unreal. But yeah, I don't know, like, if I were, it's easy to say, people in glass houses and that, but if I were an England fan, I wouldn't be too worried about it. No. As much as Italy really kept the score down and did a really good job of that. You know, sometimes those games will happen. Italy's whole thing that second half will have been, can we frustrate them?
Yeah.
And I guess they did, and that's kind of that, you know?
Yeah, massively.
So, can I look at the England attack a little bit? Because we'll make this the kind of last note or so of analysis as we go along. So, I was saying this to you before we started recording, right? That sometimes when we do analysis for something like this, we can talk about individual skills, things that individuals have done really well. But with England, in the women's team, to me, there is something much more innovative about them than most teams in international rugby, male or female. So I want to look at the lead up to Maddie Feonati's try in the first half. England here play a very unique shape, one that we've not really talked about much before. Teams kind of sometimes accidentally end up in it, but they play a 1-4-3 shape here. So usually it's Feonati 9 times out of 10 goes as the edge forward here, because most of the time the number 8 is the most dynamic carrier and more importantly the best offloader the majority of the time. So she often stays in the wide edge. Sometimes the one goes as the person hitting the edge breakdown rather than necessarily lingering on the other side. But that is kind of done on a horse for courses kind of situation. This, quite importantly, comes off kick receipt from their own kick where they're on the front foot. Kelsey Clifford is in a kind of promoted situation. It looks like she's the head carrier here with Abby Ward potentially on a tip on. But because it's a group of 4, it's quite hard to predict. Now, when we talk about someone like Ireland men or Italy men going for a group of 4, usually what they do is they go for a skip pass off 9 all the way to the man out widest or something like that as a means of throwing off a defender.
The team we've seen pick this up lately is the Springboks, right?
Yeah.
The Springboks have played 1-4-3 quite regularly. It's not the default pattern, but it's something they do regularly.
Again, it's something they slip into, you know.
But that's largely to get their big carriers into position where they are dynamic, can run off each other, but also to get the likes of Dutoy and Khaleesi out wide.
Yeah, that Franco Mostert try against Wales, perfect example of it. But instead of Kelsey Clifford being the ball carrier here, instead Amy Cockayne fires in from the inside, so the opposite of what I was saying a minute ago, and almost intercepts this ball here, right? And suddenly, Italy are having to jam in a little bit and tackle somebody else. Now, the important bit of this is Rosie Gallagher, who was a part of this 4, is now just on her feet. She's excess. She's not involved because you don't need 3 women to clear out a breakdown when you're on the front foot. Clifford's making a great carry. You do not need Gallagher as a part of this. And also, Abby Ward is still on her feet. She's not coming on the tip on. She's not had to clear anybody out. They are not wasting any women at the bottom of this breakdown. So instead, Abby Ward can just run really tight off Roland here and really tie in the defender off the back of this. And Oldcroft runs the actual line, gets hold of the ball and punches the hole through the middle of the defence. They then, off the edge, go back into the 1-4-3 formation with Feyanartes in the breakdown here, and the 4-pod obviously got on the front foot. There's 4 of them. And once again, Gallagher is excess here. She's not used in the breakdown, but being excess, being unused in this, Gallagher's next thought is, great, I just need to find some work now. I've been excess twice. I've not been, you say like a 1-3-3-1 or whatever. I've not been one of those.
And she's not upset by it.
No.
Jessie hasn't actually got tears.
No, indeed. And so she just goes and hits the next breakdown. Muir and Cockayne are in a 2 with Marley Packer having splintered off because she knows that Gallagher can come in and become the 3rd member of this. She's the floater. She is now the 3. Packer can then become the 1 and goes onto the edge, acts as an extra centre, throws this weirdly very forward offload, whatever, and isn't used in the next breakdown. She would be, but Claudia MacDonald wins this on her own. And now England have 5 forwards in this 1 pod, all on their feet. Packer obviously would have been on the floor, so they've just gone, great, where can we use me next? And Gallagher this time has paired up with Maud Muir in a 2 to just flood off Aitchison. And again, Gallagher runs a lovely short line. Aitchison skips her, beautiful flat pass to Maud Muir, who makes the break. And by this point, Cockayne has stood up and gone, I'm the excess forward, where do you need me? I'll run a short line off 10, outside line off 9 or whatever. England just go hands and Feyanartes scores off this. I just think it's a really interesting variation, right? Because if I were to ask you which of all of the forward shapes that we know of, right, which one would you say typically conserves forwards' energy the best, most equally?
Tired shape.
Come on.
1-3-3-1.
Correct. I would agree with that because in theory, if your attack's going well, you're working to the middle, to the middle, to the edge, to the middle, to the middle, to the edge. In theory, everyone has to get up
It's why it
and
exists
carry as
and
much.
why it's persevered.
Exactly. Right? It's why any forward shape exists because they figured it would conserve everybody's energy the most. However,
And also allows you to always be in shape.
yeah, exactly. But in practice, right, 9 times out of 10, out of the 1, the 3, and the 1, which one actually carries the most?
It's the 3.
It's the 3. Yeah. But here, John Mitchell has, if not curated, because I'm sure somebody's done this before.
Lou Meadows, attack coach.
Lou Meadows, I need to give more credit to. Yeah. Lou Meadows has, if not curated, then I think mastered for the time being.
I think it's a twist on what the Springboks were doing under Tony Brown.
Yes.
I think she's very much taken it, looked at the raw materials she has, which is an even more athletic but equally dominant version of that pack.
Yeah.
And gone, okay, how can we twist this to fit our means?
A system that means that you can equally give somebody in your pack a bit of a rest period. Obviously, you can't spread this evenly because you'll end up with Kelsey Clifford as an edge forward, which isn't practical. Whereas if you have, if that becomes Sarah Bernal on the edge,
That's the
not
other thing.
too bad.
It's like there are so few players in that England team who don't work in that role.
Yeah,
who couldn't
very
fit.
true.
Like they have ran Sarah Byrne as an edge forward in the past.
Yeah.
Like she is good enough. She's basically an
It's not
extra
a
number
problem.
8. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maud
So-
Muir could do that.
Yeah, exactly. So they have a system where not only do they probably in practice conserve their energy a little bit more, which is ironic because I say that, that's because if your attack's not going perfectly, and usually the Red Roses one is going perfectly, but also, as I said with Cocaine, like she's obviously no use on this last phase because it's pointless to use her, but she's going to hold a defender. So it means that she's an extra attacking option. She can, instead of somebody having to, if somebody usually ran this line, you'd go, oh, they're broken formation to do it. There is no formation for her to break, It's not positionless rugby, but it's not extremely like shoehorned rugby.
Yeah.
Like Cocaine can just go, heads up, is there a gap there? Brilliant, I'll run into it. Does this breakdown need an extra person? Great, I'll go and hit it. So they can slide around. Marley Packer on that edge, as I was talking about before, can tell Rosie Gallagher to double ruck, except she's not actually hit the previous ruck, So she's still got loads of energy. So I just think that's a really unique and interesting attacking formation that England have implemented here. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see if other teams in the Women's Six Nations, if not in men's rugby, have the resources and kind of the skill set and fitness to pull this off.
The resources is the big point, isn't it? It's like, do teams have the weaponry to do this?
Yeah.
I don't know. The Red Roses are way beyond everyone else in that regard, though France and the Black Ferns, we'll see. It's a really interesting
They
game.
are the team in all of rugby who have the most players who could function as either a middle or an edge forward.
Yeah.
Who aren't
Yeah, yeah.
specialised.
Yeah.
Maybe like the All Blacks
France men.
Yeah,
Yeah.
France men have a few players that could do both roles. The speed differential between the Red Roses forwards and a lot of other team in women's rugby's backs, right? There is actually something there.
Yeah.
That Maud Muir is fast enough to be a back row forward or could get away with playing 12.
Sadia Kabir could be a back.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the perfect team to trial this with, and so far it's bloody working.
Really intriguing.
And also, it's very ambitious. So if that leads to performances where your team is playing so badly that they're only winning by 30 points, persist with it for a little bit.
Particularly, perhaps, this coming weekend, you could trial it, perhaps, an even more experimental one.
Ooh.
Where perhaps your team go down to only winning by 10, let's say.
Or like -1.
To quote the holdovers, I can't even dream a full dream.
Look, the 1-4-3, very interesting attacking shape. I've got a better one that England should run. 0.
Yeah, I think 1-4-3 should be the score, but the 1 is the scoreline. Then it's just 43 to Wales.
Yeah.
Or 1-4. No, 1-4 is 14. 14-3 to Wales.
So we never
later.
do predictions on here. We predict how the teams might play, right?
Sure.
And what patterns they might run and so on. We don't usually do score predictions because you can only be wrong on them. However, for once, we're going to do an official score prediction, right? Wales are going to win 43-1.
14 or 14-3. The stars are very uncertain in that. The palms do not tell us which way around that score is going to be.
Or maybe Wales might lose. Fuck knows.